Hi, this is Debbie Hardy, and I'm going to teach you how you can write 400 words and get published. No, you don't have to write an entire book to get published, but I'm going to show you how you can get a first step into the publishing world. But before we get started, yes, that is a Christmas tree behind me. I decided a couple years ago, I didn't want the hassle of putting it up and taking it down every year. So it's been up in my living room for a couple of years, and on a dark and dreary day, or when I'm zoomed out, I turn it on and it cheers me up. Back to writing. Write 400 words and get published. How in the world can you do that? It's really easy. You write a devotion. It's a very quick way to get published. Standard formatting for your document for publishing is double-spaced, Times New Roman 12, a lot of other things, but that will allow you about 250 words on a page. So writing 400 words is about a page and a half. Easy way to get published. Let me just explain first of all the difference between devotions and devotionals. Sorry about that extra slide in there. The difference between devotions and devotionals. A devotion contains a single scripture and a single thought. It's a snapshot. A devotional is a book with many devotions in it. You can publish your own devotional if you like, if you want to write a bunch of devotions, or you could submit to others, like Our Daily Bread, Guideposts, that sort of thing, to write one devotion to put in there. This is the most important thing you will ever learn in your writing journey. Check submission guidelines and follow the instructions. Otherwise, you are getting yourself rejected. Now, I didn't realize this, and I got a request from a friend who was a publisher and needed an extra article for a magazine. So he sent an email to all of his friends and said, please write it on this and send it in. So I did. I wrote the most beautiful thing, attached it to my email and sent it back to him. And within seconds, I got an email that said, if you had read our guidelines, you'd know we don't accept attachments because we've gotten a virus in the past. So I got myself rejected. So don't do that. I'm saving you the hassle. Check submission guidelines. Of course, there will always be those who refuse to follow the rules. And I hate to say it, but a lot of them are writers. There are 1,000 different ways to write devotions, but there are 4 elements that need to be in every devotion that you write, and it'll probably in every devotion that you read. Number 1, start with scripture. That's what a devotion is. It's looking at scripture and applying it to our everyday life. So start with the scripture. I'm not saying, I've had people say that, well, you have to get a scripture and then build a devotion from that. That's not how I do it. I get an idea from everyday life and I find a scripture that meshes with it, and that's how I put the two together. But be sure you start your devotion with a solid scripture. Second, tell a story that relates to it. People remember stories. If you just talk about a scripture and how it get applied to your life, whatnot, people aren't going to remember that. How many times have you walked out of a church service and thought, oh, that was such a fabulous sermon. That was, oh, it just touched my heart, but I don't remember what he said. But if whoever was speaking told you a story and applied the scripture in the story, then you can remember it. I remember sermons from many years ago because of the story that went along with it. So tell a story. Number 3, explain the story, how it applies to you and to the reader. You always need to keep the reader in mind. The reader is always thinking, okay, what's in it for me? So if you explain how it relates to them, then they will connect with your writing. And last but not least, give your reader a takeaway. What can your devotion do to change their lives? How can it change them? Writing devotions is a really good learning opportunity. It may not be the first thing you want published like a book, but it can get you going. And also, most devotions, I represent ChristianDevotions.us, so I'm going to speak from their standpoint, will allow you to put a bio and a picture at the end of your devotion. So you can have your own picture there. You can have a picture of a book that you've published. You can put your website in. You can put your email address, whatever you'd like. And it gets people familiar with you and your name. Let me give you a secret here. No one will buy a book unless they know your name and or the name of the book, preferably both. So the more people hear your name, the more they're going to remember it and they're going to know you. I can't tell you the number of times I've met somebody and they look at me and they say, Debbie Hardy, where do I know that name from? And I can say, well, I've done this and this. And then I'll say, oh, that's right, I read your devotion. Oh, that's right, I saw your book, or whatever. They know my name. So this is a way to get your name out there. And also to connect them to your website. You can put a link in there. Writing devotions teaches you to write tight. Some people write blogs that are 2,000 and 3,000 words long. When you divide that up to 250 words per page, that's a whole lot of pages for people to sit through. And I don't know about you, but I just don't take my time to do that. I have friends that I dearly love, but when they get too wordy, I just don't read them. So you don't want to do that. Learn to write tight. Use the correct words so that you don't have to wander and say everything in the world. What happens is that people get carried away and they get too much stuff in a devotion. And if you start with one scripture and one thought, then you get down into it, discover you have another scripture or two or three more thoughts, you probably have 2 or 3 devotions. So get back to the one you were working with and leave all the bunny trails for the other devotions to write later. So stick with one scripture, one devotion, but don't throw anything away. If you had a great idea for another scripture, write it down somewhere, keep track of it, and then you can go back and write another one. It's just that easy. Writing devotions teaches you to be concise because you don't have a lot of words. You can't wander and just make up words and say whatever you want. You have to keep it within a certain limit. I was going to apply to a devotional one time, but they wanted 150 words. How can you explain things in 150 words? That's really concise. ChristianDevotions.us, we write 400 words, so that gives you a little bit of wiggle room to write, but you still have to be concise. You can't ramble on and on. Albert Einstein has a great quote: if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. Makes sense to me. So be able to explain it simply, put it down on paper. Writing devotions develops your vocabulary. You have to learn to use one word that would take the place of 4 or 5 words in a sentence. You don't use a big word when a singularly unloquacious and diminutive linguistic expression will satisfactorily accomplish the contemporary necessity. Makes perfect sense if you speak Greek. Writing devotions stretches your imagination. Now, let me give you an idea. I wrote a devotion one time called "My Dishwasher Ate My Glasses." That attracted a lot of attention. I had gotten a new dishwasher and I loaded it just like you normally do. Dishes on the top shelf, plates down below. But the plates weren't held snug. And so when they got hot and they bumped and touched each other, a big chunk would be taken out of one of the glasses. Every time I opened my dishwasher, there was a bite out of one of my glasses. But I learned that if I put them down below, I could wedge them together so they would hold each other secure and keep each other from getting hurt. How hard do you think that was to apply to scripture? I just used my imagination. And you're a writer. You're allowed to make stuff up too. You don't have to just say what happened to you. You can make up a story. You've heard the story about the little boy who walked along the beach and he saw a starfish and tossed it back in the ocean. And his dad said, "Why are you doing that? You can't save them all." And the little boy said, "But I saved that one." Chances are that didn't happen. But it gets a story across, it gets a point across. But let me give you a warning. You're not being sinful in making up a story, but don't make up stories that are going to upset people. I had a friend one time who wrote a devotion about losing his wife to cancer. I didn't know he'd lost his wife to cancer. So I emailed him and said, "I'm so sorry to hear that. I went through the same thing with my husband and I was empathizing with him." And he replied and said, "Oh, my wife didn't die. I just made that up." Don't do that. Please don't do that. Because people will remember if you wrote about your dead wife and then later you're talking about your wife just the other day, they're going to know you're lying. Okay? But you are allowed to make stuff up. Writing devotions teaches you to focus on one thought. Like I said before, if you find 2 or 3 thoughts in there, you have 2 or 3 devotions. So you can use others to write other devotions. This is an example of how I kept track of my devotions for ChristianDevotions.us. I wrote for them for 3 or 4 years, and I got published once a month. She liked my writing, but I made a spreadsheet, and I listed all the scripture. You'll see here I have, this is Old Testament and the New Testament, and I put them in order so I wouldn't repeat. I found myself going back to the same scripture, going, oh, this is a great one. I already wrote that one. So this way I kept track of it. And then this is a title of a possible title that I thought of it. They have different topics for different days of the week. So I decided which topic it would fit under, when it was submitted, when it was accepted, when it was published. And here, this is where I copied and pasted the scripture itself. I got these from BibleGateway.com, where you can get all kinds of translations, like over 200 translations of scripture. Normally, ChristianDevotions.us uses NIV. So if you're using a different one, you have to tell them. You have to also check what, if you're going to submit to other devotionals, what translation they use, and follow their guidelines. Use their translation. If you're going to use a different one, you have to tell them that. Okay, so this is how I kept track of it. Just keep track of it. And if you're going to submit to more than one devotional, add another well, maybe another column in here and say submitted to, and then who you submitted to, if it was ChristianDevotions.us or if it was someone else, Guideposts, whatever. Just keep track of it, because your writing, once it takes off, you'd be surprised how much your writing adds up. Write the devotion the best you can and submit it. Okay. Too many people say that, oh, well, it's not good enough, I don't want to submit it yet. Well, go ahead and do it. We at ChristianDevotions.us will help you to improve your devotion. Believe it or not, we have an editor. Well, we're not going to just send it back and say this is terrible, but our editor will mentor you to get your devotion published. My first submission, I sent it in. I thought it was brilliant. I got an email back that said, I like this, but can we switch paragraphs 2 and 3? Didn't matter to me, so I replied and said, sure, no problem. Within minutes, I got an email back that told me what day my devotion was going to be published. It was just that simple. Okay. If you have a heart to learn and a teachable spirit, our editor will help you. We'll go back and forth with you to get you published. Some people say, well, no, I don't want it edited. I want it the way it is. Well, you know, it's not going to get published that way. So just get over yourself. But if you are willing to be mentored, willing to be taught, then you can have your devotion published. 3 things to avoid when writing devotions. Be sure of this. Avoid typos. Charlie Brown says, I hate spelling errors. You mix up 2 letters and your whole post is urine. Don't you hate it when that happens? Number 1, avoid questions in your devo. When you ask a question, you're making people stop to think, and they will stop reading, and they may not continue reading. So don't ask questions. You can end with a question if you want. Not the best way to end a devo, but you can end it with, but don't stick a question in the middle of it. That pulls people out. The more you ask, the more you lose your reader. Avoid exclamation marks. These imply shouting. So strengthen your sentences and your reader will see the emphasis that you want. You don't need the exclamation points. You also don't need them when you're writing a book or an article or a blog. Let me just tell you. I have read somewhere it's like, oh, get over the exclamation points, you know, and I finally quit reading. Avoid being preachy. Nobody wants to get preached at, even on Sunday morning when you're listening to a preacher. You don't want to get preached at, so don't be preachy. Don't point a finger. Watch your pronouns. Instead of saying, you need to do this, say, we need to do this. Or let's be more compassionate. Or how about if we did this? Include yourself. But avoid controversial subjects. However, Stephen James said, don't be afraid to write the tough subjects, but write them from an angle of compassion and consequence rather than standing on your soapbox. People don't like other people who stand on a soapbox and just say, do this, do this, do this. So keep that in mind. Our format is very simple. Hook, look, book, and took. I love it. Any Bible college will teach this. This is the way to write a sermon. And I'll explain each one of them. Hook, you catch the reader's attention. It's like when you're watching a movie or a TV show and they open with a 10-second or 30-second scene and something drastic happens and the fire is racing across the field and something happens and it catches your attention and you want to see the rest of it. Do the same thing in your devo. Catch the reader's attention. Challenge yourself to get the hook in the first line, if not in the first paragraph. Also, pictures draw a reader in on social media, but we provide them. We got into copyright issues when people were sending in the pictures along with their devotions. So you don't need to provide pictures for us. We will do that. The next step is look, present the big picture, like with my dishwasher. Present the big picture. Okay, here's what my dishwasher was doing. Explain that. Offer practical application lessons and tips. Okay. Life application lessons and tips. Then the next step is a book. Explain your key point and your interpretation of scripture. You've already mentioned the scripture at the beginning, so you don't need to repeat it. And this is where most readers will have an aha moment. Make this paragraph tie back to the scripture. Okay. It's just like in my dishwasher thing. My scripture was Ecclesiastes 4:9 and 10. Two are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. Either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. So I just said, when I have some people close to me helping me, if I stumble, they're there to catch me. Check the guidelines for where you're submitting, because some want the scripture at the ending, some at the beginning, and some want them mixed in the middle. Be sure you follow the guidelines. The reason for that is the publisher knows what their readers want and what their readers are expecting. So if you're going to do what their readers want, they will want you to write for them. Anecdotes are wonderful. Again, people like stories. Like the kid with the starfish, like the dishwasher eating my glasses, like whatever. Give them a story that will help them to remember it as well. Use yourself in the story, even if it's not true. I usually tell true stories on myself, but you can tell what someone else did by using yourself instead of them to avoid lawsuits. A sign of a good writer is if you could tell a story on yourself that's not true and they don't know it. And they don't question it, and they accept it as, oh yeah, that really happened to her. Okay. Also, if they're still thinking about it a few hours later, that's a sign of a really good devotion. But use yourself. Don't put somebody else in an awkward position. Took. Close with an action statement. That's a takeaway for your reader. Challenge the reader. Give them a takeaway. It may not sink in right that second, but if you've written it in a strong way, it'll stay with them. Give your reader something strong to think about. Say, this is how it applies to me in my life, and it can apply to their lives as well. This is how we can change the world. This is how we can change ourselves. This is whatever. Read devotions at christiandevotions.us for examples. They're great. They're published every day. You can sign up to get an email. They're published online every day. Sign up to get an email, and you'll get it in your inbox every day. For some people, that's the only Bible they read all day. So that's why we are very strict about the format that's submitted and how we publish it, because that's what our readers want. If you want to write for Christian Devotions, go to christiandevotions.us. And you'll see if I could get my cursor to show up here. There's my cursor. See right down here, it says Write for Us. That's our banner. write for us, you click on that little banner. Check out the format. There's also instructions in there, and I'll tell you how to write. You submit it to the email on there. You write 400 words. It can be a little bit less, not a lot less, because our readers expect 400 words. Write 400 words, not counting the scripture, which is good because the scripture sometimes is 50 words right there. So check the guidelines, no matter who you're going to submit to. Be sure that you follow their guidelines. We were paying for a while because one of the founding members decided that he wanted to pay the writers who are taking time out of their day to write these devotions. We discovered when we offered money, we got garbage submitted. The quality of the devotions went because people just cared about the dollar. They didn't care about how they were affecting lives. When we quit paying, the quality of the devotions went back up. So that's why we are a non-paying market. But it's free advertising, which is great. Some people send a link, not a Devo. We will not publish that. You can submit something that's already been published someplace else, like on your blog or whatever, but you need to tell us if this was previously published at whatever. Let us know. There are copyright issues that we need to follow. And so let us know where it was published. It was previously published on such and such a blog or at such and such a website. But just let us know. Send us the words that you want published, not the link. One other thing, we don't take your rights. Excuse me. We don't take your rights, which means after we published it, we would like to have first rights, which means don't publish anyplace else until it appears on our website and in our emails. But if you want to publish it again after that, you're free to do that. It's your words, it's your Devo. Publish it someplace else. In fact, I've been thinking about taking all the ones that I have from the 3 years. Gee, that's 36. I need to write a few more, but I could probably put together a little book of devotions. I just might do that. But you could do that yourself. One other thing, if we decide that we want to create a book of devotions, we might want to do a book on finances or a book on relationships or on family or whatever. And we will take the best devotions that we've received to put in there. We would ask that you wait 8 months for us to market the book before you publish it elsewhere. Okay, that's just giving us a fair attack at it so that we can market the book itself. I don't know how soon we're going to be publishing a book, so for right now, you can republish it. If you've submitted someplace else, be sure it's okay with them before you publish it. Okay, if you had something in Guideposts or Our Daily Bread or another devotional, Guideposts isn't a devotional, but you know what I mean. If you had something published there, be sure they're okay with having it republished. And again, you need to give them credit for publishing it first. Most publishers don't want previously published devos. Most of them don't. They want something fresh. If that's the case, if you've published something here and you want to submit it someplace else, just change it. Take the same idea, rewrite it, rework it, edit it. Make it substantially different, 30 to 40% different, and then you could submit it. But you can tweak it and then submit it. However, we've gotten calls from publishers who liked an author's writing and wanted to offer them a contract to submit to a devotional that they're putting together. So you never know. You never know. I never got called for that. I wish I had. I would have jumped on it, but you never know. And it's getting your name out again, because then, okay, Random House wants me to write for them. Okay, I'm in a Random House book. That goes on your resume. That goes in your book proposals and whatnot. It helps you get ahead. So you might want to get published on ChristianDevotions.us. It is okay to borrow from our website if you see a devotion on there that you want to put in your church's newsletter, or you want to put it on your blog. Get the author's permission. not ChristianDevotionUS.permission. At the end of the blog, like I said, there you're going to have a bio with a way to contact the person. So click on that, contact them, ask them if it's okay. Be sure you get a response in writing on an email or a letter, whatever, that you can republish that. Check the guidelines every time you submit, even if you've submitted over and over and over to the same place, because every once in a while they change the rules. And publishing is a very fickle industry. Publishers, editors, agents come and go. They move between houses. It's a very fluid industry. So this person may have set the rules, but now they've gone over to that company and this person has come in and they have different rules. So check the guidelines every time you submit. And here we have a meeting of the Obsessive Compulsive Editing Disorder Support Group. The person says, "Oh, wait, I'm not quite ready to submit it yet. Just need to go over it one more time." Let me suggest that you just write it and submit. It's like when you're fixing dinner and you have 10 people sitting around your table waiting to eat. You don't say, "Wait a minute, let me just tweak this a little. Let me add a little bit more salt. Let me put a little bit more milk in here. Let me do that." No, you finally say, "This is good enough. Enjoy. It's the best I can do." Do that with your writing as well. Just write and submit. Now I have a challenge for you. I dare you to submit in the next month. I dare you to do that. And I know you can do it because you're a writer. Don't say, "I want to be a writer." Say, "I am a writer." And I bet you can do it. So you submit to ChristianDevotions.us or whoever. Go online and search for devotionals. My recommendation would be to get a copy of the Christian Writers Market Guide, and it will list devotionals in there, or periodicals that have devotions in them to submit to. If you submit to ChristianDevotions.us, tell them that you sat in on my training, that you got my training on Zoom and you actually sat through it in your house and watched me with my Christmas tree. Because they like to know that I'm actually doing something to bring people and bring writers in. So I dare you to submit. So go out and change the world 400 words at a time.